Hello, you guys, and welcome back to the podcast. We're still in Chicago apartment, but don't you worry, bitches. We have moved from the kitchen into finally an office. We have a desk. We have our little lawn chair. I'm sitting on pillows. We are in the middle of chaos, but I really was very excited to deliver this episode to you guys. We have one of my beautiful clients, Sacia. Sacia Ashe is a brand and web designer. She specifically works with a lot of product-based businesses and e-commerce businesses. And even if they're not an e-commerce business, you'd be like, why would I listen to this episode? Guys, Sacia is like a serial freaking entrepreneur. She was hustling and making money and signing $1,000 clients at age 12. She was building websites and multiple blogs at a young age. She literally started her business that she's currently running at age 22. And so she has a lot of wisdom on what it looks like to start a business and get maybe some criticism or pushback when you're young, what it looks like to start without necessarily knowing like how you're going to deliver results to clients, what it looks like to just jump into a business with not necessarily like a full-blown business plan. We talk a little bit about her journey, but also for you brand enthusiasts, we talk a little bit about how the market is shifting. When should you invest in a business coach versus when should you invest in brand strategy? What it looks like to build a standout website. How do you stand out in your industry? How can you build $1 million company from your content, from your brand presence alone? What does that look like? And we do give a little bit of feedback to some big brands that you guys know and love towards the end as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Sacia. Stay tuned. Sacia, I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. And one of the first things, I don't feel like you're going to be surprised that I'm asking you about this because I have harped on how incredibly impressive you are, but also how incredibly impressive you are for being so young. Can you tell everyone how young you were? How little baby Sacia, how young were you when you started your business?
So I started my business like a couple months after turning 22. I technically started like freelancing when I was 20, 21, but I started like my actual agency at 22.
Yeah. And what's also crazy is you did all this like while you're in school. So I feel like a lot of people really struggle with like, how can I start my career? A lot of people assume internships. A lot of people assume, like my job experience, like that's what I'm going to get out of. You actually literally started a business. And can you give everyone like a little bit of a behind the scenes of like, how did you make that decision? And then what were some of your first moves in kind of getting your business off the ground?
Yeah, I started my business kind of just because I'm a serial entrepreneur. Like I have been starting businesses since I was super young. I don't know how I forgot about this, but my mom reminded me that I used to sell like business coaching at age 12, like 4-figure business coaching packages.
Wait,
I totally just blanked out that I did that, which is wild. I used to be like a blogger. And so I guess I've been doing it for a long time. There's like a lot of eras that I kind of just forgot about that my mom has reminded me about recently, like as I've grown this business. But when I got to college, I kind of didn't know what I was doing. I went to school in Hawaii and I was pretty much only focused on running track. Like academics I was good at, but I didn't really care that much about or focus on. And so I was always trying random things and making money. And I started a product business originally. And as that kind of caught steam and people saw what I was doing, they wanted me to help out with like their brand or their website or just generally helping them get off the ground to go do something on their own. And that's kind of how it steamrolled into what I have now.
Every business owner, I've said this now the last couple episodes, every business owner I've talked to, their business kind of happened organically. Like, yes, they might have been a serial entrepreneur. Yes, they might have like been interested in starting a business, but a lot of like, what is their main core of their business? You obviously being in the web design kind of brand development space, a lot of that came very organically there. Were you ever like nervous to go out and sign clients? It sounds like not, because if at 12 you were trying to sell 4-figure packages, like a lot of people get very nervous, like asking for money. Did you ever struggle with that? Or was that something that you just naturally were like super comfortable doing?
I feel like I've had a reverse struggle. So when I first started my business, I never really conceptualized like being nervous or being worried about anything. I figured I would figure it out. Like if someone's paying me a lot, I will figure it out. I know who to hire. I know how to get help if I need it. But the more I've run my business, like the more nervous I've gotten. And I think it's because my standard for what is good work has risen significantly. And so, yeah, I think when I first started my business, I definitely didn't charge as much, but that's because I really did not deserve to charge anything. I didn't know what I was doing at all. But after I've signed like my first couple of clients and I proved that, okay, I actually do know what I'm doing. Like I raised my rates quite quickly. I feel like as I started getting more and more clients, that's when nervousness came in and I started having like this level of expectation for myself that was not as realistic.
Yeah, they always say like the heaviest thing about scaling a business is starting to have success because you one want to replicate it, and two, you're like nervous about like how do I get to the next level? Because I actually think there is something to be said about the beginning stages being the hardest and the easiest in my opinion, because your awareness is so small in some ways that you just like don't know what to expect. And as you scale and as you start to build more, you almost get like more awareness. Therefore, you get more like hesitation and you get more, you kind of like start to hold on to your business more because you built it and now it's something that could be taken away from you. When's the like first time that moment happened to you? Did that happen more recently or did that happen like in fairly early stages?
Yeah, I think it's happened in a couple of different ways. Definitely most recently, I've been having a lot of fear come up around like client delivery and managing my team and the expectations I have for my team, because I obviously don't want to be like a super harsh boss or mean, but there are certain expectations I have to meet. And the higher level, especially in e-commerce, like the higher level of business that you're working with, the more that their website can directly affect their sales. So like we recently had, it wasn't an issue per se, but it was just something that was caught in the design process where if it wasn't caught, like that would have cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales. And I think after that happened, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I really have a big responsibility here, especially with these businesses that are already off the ground. And like now I'm managing that. So I think that's when it started to crop up, is like when my work directly started to affect the sales of other business owners.
Yeah, that makes like a ton of sense. I'm curious for you, when you started to realize like you had more responsibility, can you tell me a little bit about how you navigated that like pressure? Because business owners, I think a lot of times we see the money, we see the success, but at the end of a service or at the end of a product is a result or is a transformation or is impact. And I think sometimes people don't start businesses because they don't feel like they can deliver upon like what they're wanting to do, or they don't feel like they're good enough. How did you like navigate that? Like as you were starting to feel that pressure, like what did that process look like for you?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all is reteaching myself like what leadership is and how to be a good leader, because I never really learned that. I'm 23 and the only jobs I've had are working really in like surf shops and doing social media management or like customer service for surfers, which is a very different environment than doing it for people who are running like e-commerce businesses. So first is teaching myself how to be a leader, how to lead a team of developers, which can be tricky because they definitely have a different personality than like creatives. And you have to be a lot more logic minded when you're explaining things to them. So learning how to do that was really important, because that was a big skill that I felt like if I didn't have, I would kind of fall apart under pressure. And so I'm definitely still learning that. And then another thing too is realizing like how important regulating emotions is as a business owner. I used to think it was quite woo-woo and not really something I needed to worry about, but I would recognize like even a couple of weeks ago, I was recognizing, oh, my heart rate's getting really high. Like I'm not in a clear state to make decisions in these high pressure situations. And so I've been learning how to regulate my emotions through things and not make decisions out of fear or out of emotion, or tell a client, no, we can't do that just because I'm stressed and overwhelmed. Like learning that if I'm going to scale, I have to jump into situations and learn to regulate instead of just run away from them.
Yeah, I'd be curious about your perspective on something. One of the things that a lot of people struggle with is like, when do I start? When am I ready? And obviously for you, you started at a very young age. You started in the midst of a lot of moving parts. You started with maybe not the most experience. We never do, but you started in that pace. Like, how did you know you were like ready to start the business? What does ready mean to you? Was there a ready? Was it just like, I'm going to figure it out? Like, what does that look like? Because there's a lot of people who are listening to these episodes every week and they're like, I want to start a business. Like, how do I know I'm worth anything yet? How do I know that I can actually like support a client? Like, how do I know that? Like, what was that aha, I'm ready for this like moment for you?
So I'll speak from like me personally, and then also just because I have a lot of friends who start businesses, and I noticed it really is a personality thing and a personality difference. For me personally, I was going into it with like experience from school and experience from doing things for my mom, who's an entrepreneur, or myself. And so I knew like I didn't have direct client experience, but I had the skills that I needed to navigate client problems in the future. So it's not like I was learning a new skill and learning how to manage a business. Like I kind of already had the skill down. So that's one, is I was going into an area that I felt comfortable with. Like I think if I jumped into a completely different area like financial coaching or something, I have no idea how to do financial coaching. I also didn't know how to run a business. And so like obviously I would feel really overwhelmed with that because I wouldn't know how to navigate that. So one is like going into an area where you actually feel confident in the skill at least, because then no matter what the business throws at you, at least you know you're good at your job, or like have the skills to navigate client work. And then I've noticed with friends who start businesses, if they have the personality where they learn really quickly and they're fine under pressure, then they can start before they feel fully ready and like be totally fine. And I think if you make the decision that you have that type of personality, you can do that. And then some people feel more comfortable like taking things slow, still having a full-time job and easing into it, and they're still doing well now. It just took them a bit longer. And so I think it's fine to do it either way as well.
That makes like a ton of sense. I'm such a firm believer. You said something really impactful about like, if you do something where you already have like the skill set, there's a lot of individuals out there right now who have a $1 million business vision. They just don't know how to execute it because they just don't start. Like I truly believe the easiest businesses are something that you're like naturally very good at. And so when did you like know that you had like a brand brain? Like you were such a brand person. When was like the first indication where you're like, this is the direction that I'm going to go?
I have always loved blogging. Like I think I mentioned a little bit before. And so web design was something I was so comfortable with. Like I could literally build a website with my eyes closed. I love building websites.
Oh, like when did you build your first website? Like that's such an interesting thing to be like, I'm like so into this. Like, was that a young thing?
Yes, I built my first website because I used to love mermaids. And I remember distinctly being like 11, I think. And I was on my grandma's phone at dinner and I got super bored. And somehow, I don't know how I did this on a cell phone. Somehow I built like a blog about mermaids, didn't tell my parents. And that's obviously like a kind of iffy subject to be typing about on the internet if you're a young child. So they found out and they saw like these weird spam bots that had come onto my blog and they got so upset and I was grounded for probably months from any technology. So that's like my first web building experience. I've been doing it for a really long time, like as a kid. So that's kind of the first signs of me liking it. And then I got more into art in high school. I went to school for arts. And so I was really into like drawing and sketching things out. And I always loved building businesses. And so I feel like the two just merged. And it was always my favorite part of building like the random businesses I've had was building out the brand, building out like the clothing tags and the cute little market surrounding pop-up things. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
It's such a cool thing. Sometimes when we go back, we like think about things and we're like, oh, that was the moment. I should have known then that this is what I was going to end up. Like you kind of have those things where you're like, oh, this like all triggers back to that. So tell me about the 12-year-old selling the business coaching. Like, do you remember any of that? Like it sounds like your mom is giving you the like, don't remember, or like, you remember this, honey, like this has always been you. Like you've been doing so many things. I know your mom's like a big cheerleader for you and stuff, but like, do you remember any of that? Like give me the flashbacks of the different seasons. I want to hear them.
Okay, I kind of do. And I actually found like little pictures of myself on Google from this era, which is so funny. But I had a knitting blog, which is so nerdy. This is so nerdy. I hope my boyfriend never hears this. But I had a knitting blog and I would like teach people how to knit and write about the stuff I was making. And I used to be like into fashion and things. And so I started getting onto podcasts to talk about this blog. And people who were like my mother's age started asking me how I grew the blog, like how I got sponsors, things like that. And I also had like a knitting course and they were asking me how I did that, how I built that. And so my mom was like, why don't you offer them business coaching? And I think I did research like at that age and saw what other coaches were charging. And I didn't really have a concept of money. So it's just like, yeah, I'll put $1,000 on my website and just see where it goes. And I think I booked like one person. I don't know why you would pay a 12-year-old $1,000, but you can do anything you set your mind to.
Yeah, of course. Do you find that your age is sometimes a deterrent of signing clients? A lot of people, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit too. Like, do you find that people struggle to buy from you because you're so young? Have you had any issues with like being able to present yourself as tenured or experienced because of your age?
Yes, I definitely have. And I do think I've had to like not change my personality necessarily, but kind of change my approach, especially in the business space. And it also depends on who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to someone who's younger than me or the same age, around the same age, I don't have to do this so much. But if I'm talking to someone who's a bit older than me, I have noticed that I have to take like a couple of deep breaths before a sales call, make sure I'm not very excited because my voice gets like very light and high when it's
You have like a very young, like fiery
yeah.
energy. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I talk really fast, like it's a whole thing. So I have to calm myself down before sales calls and go into it with like a slightly deeper tone of voice, sound really chill, use less slang. And I think that's kind of helped on sales calls specifically, but it's weird because I have to do that on sales calls to sign clients more effectively. But then in content, if I'm like that, it doesn't work as well. So it's kind of been strange, like learning to manage two different sections of my personality, the more professional on sales calls and then more authentic self on actual content.
Yeah. What has been the hardest thing of the last year? Like, what's one of the biggest lessons or biggest takeaways you've like figured out in your business over the last year?
I think that one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn is to trust the people who mentor me. I've had you as a mentor, and then I also have another amazing mentor, both of which have taught me really amazing different things, and learning to like listen to you both instead of just insist that my own way is going to work, which it doesn't, has been the biggest lesson. And it's also like not just that, but listening to the right people in my life and learning to also tune out the voices of people who I actually shouldn't be trusting. So random people on the internet, oftentimes my parents who think that they know a lot about the space I'm in, but don't, and like doubters, I would say. So that's lesson one. And then the other lesson I've had to learn is consistency is really important and things are always a lagging measure. So like if it feels like I had no inquiries, usually if I look back a month or two, I haven't posted content then, but I feel consistent now. And so waiting for things to catch up.
That is such a good one. I've always said that. I learned that in sales when I was at the sales job. Anytime I was having like a bad month of sales, he's like, well, what was your activity 6 weeks ago? It was always 6 weeks. That was kind of our point. But I actually think that's really an important thing you just said about like everything really is a lagging measure because we think so often like consistency means like I'm always working hard or I'm always in hustle mode. I really think consistency is determining like what your non-negotiables are and executing on those in a consistent way so that you're always moving the needle forward. What have been your non-negotiables or what are some of the things that you do every single day or consistently to keep your business moving forward? Because you've grown very quickly this last year, which by the way, congratulations. I'm really proud of you. But like, what have been the things that you've like made as non-negotiables or things that you like are consistent on in your business right now?
Yeah. So I think when I first started, for context, and this is relevant, but my boyfriend and I are long distance. And I was finding it really hard to maintain lead flow consistency. And I realized it was because every like 3 weeks, I would go to my boyfriend's house for a week and not touch my business. And so, like you said, I had to set non negotiables. And it didn't matter if I was embarrassed to record in front of him. It didn't matter if I was nervous to set the boundary of I need to get this hour of work in. Like it had to happen. And that fixed the problem. So non-negotiable one is posting content at least 3 days a week. Did not do that last week, but besides last week, I've been really good about it. And once I created a content calendar, like my business transformed. My business basically doubled after that because I was posting consistently. So that's one. Second is outreach. Outreach has worked really well for me. I think just because I do it genuinely and not just sending emails to random people. And so making sure I'm sending at least 5 outreach emails every week as a minimum has been important. And then the last one is delivering client work well and on time. I struggle with timelines and I always am a perfectionist about things, but it was backlogging my projects. And so setting a non-negotiable of checking in on timelines, making sure I'm delivering things on time. I've noticed my clients care a lot more about that than like the work being perfect. And I get more referrals because of that as well. And I can actually fit in the referrals because I'm on timeline with everything.
Those are like really, really good ones. Okay. I want to talk a little bit now about your business and things you've been doing in your business. So web design, branding space, like everything's changed a lot because of social media. What are some things that you've seen as far as like pivots, changes, how people are utilizing social, how people are utilizing their websites, their brand, like brand shifts? What have you seen over the last year? Kind of give us a little pulse check on your industry, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been noticing a lot of shifts pretty quickly in the industry, especially over the last year, because AI has kind of exploded. So when AI first started exploding, like more at the beginning of this year, I definitely noticed that people were leaning more into that type of content, using ChatGPT a lot and just like pumping out content. Like I've never seen more content on the internet. But recently, I've noticed that the service providers and e-commerce businesses that are doing the best are producing things at a slower rate, are writing the web copy themselves and like creating the website slower, but in a more intentional way. And people care about that effort. And so it's not that AI is bad, but I have been noticing a shift away from like mass production, super fast things like website in a day, and people leaning more into, okay, I want to do it right this time. Like I tried to do it the super fast way and it burned me. And so that's the biggest thing. And like being slower about launches, being slower about content and production has been a huge trend I've noticed recently.
That's really interesting. I know you were like kind of anti-trends in your business for like kind of a while. What's your like take on that now? How has that shifted?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first started, I was very vocally anti-trend. I think that's also because I'm young, but I like wanted to make it clear that I don't have the typical Gen Z like random colors style. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just have a different design taste. And so I was very vocal about that. But I have been shifting my perspective on this because I just have noticed patterns in even luxury brands like Vogue and Rode, which sold recently, and Poppy, and all of these brands that are doing really well. They actually do have a trending brand and kind of a trendy brand. And it's not that you want your brand to rely on trends solely. And you also have to be careful about what trends you're choosing to build on. But if you build a brand that leans into where the market is trending versus just like a section of the market, that do a lot better than trying to build like a timeless brand and ending up looking kind of boring or not relevant. And so, yeah, my perspective on trends is you do have to pay attention to them and see what things are consistently coming up and also what stays in style over time and what's lasted for like decades. And I think that is what will help you build a brand that's relevant, but also relatively timeless.
Yeah. How have you incorporated that clarity into your clients' work? Like, how do you help them understand how to have a fresh perspective, which I think is what you've always been about, but also just take note of like what's working in the industry? Like, how have you found that balance? What has worked? What has not worked? Can you give us like some insight on that?
Yeah, a couple of things. We take a different approach to target market research and brand strategy than a lot of other designers I've seen in the space. So rather than like going to the classic market research areas, which I definitely use, like Answer the Public and things like that, I like to immerse myself in my client's world. So literally creating a burner account and acting as though I'm their customer on TikTok and Instagram and seeing what naturally catches my eye, especially because usually clients will hire me because I'm in their demographic or like kind of aware of their demographic. And so immersing myself in their world, putting myself in the shoes of their customer and seeing like, okay, what are they scrolling? What's their competition doing? How can we kind of section ourselves away from the competition, but also pull on things that are working really well? So for example, like if I was launching a natural soda brand like a Poppy, I would go and look at what consumers of Poppy are looking at and see if there's any other industry trends that we can grab and pull into this market. So like maybe they're super into Urban Decay makeup. Can we lean into that like kind of sexy sex appeal thing that Urban Decay is doing, but put it into soda? Like how can we merge industry trends and merge like things they're looking at in another space into this new space? and differentiate the brand that way, even if the product isn't like super innovative or crazy.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Can you tell me a little bit about like brand strategy? Because that's one thing that I feel like, I'm a business coach, obviously, that my audience knows that. And one of the things I always hear about web designers, brand strategists, anyone in this world is like, people just want like the product. They want the web design. They want the website. They want the logo. They want the packaging. People really struggle with brand strategy. Can you tell me what you define as like brand strategy?
Yeah, I've noticed there's a lot of consumer education that needs to be done around brand strategy because it's actually what will get someone the most tangible ROI. Like if you were to take away the aesthetic look of the brand and the actual functionality of a website at its core, if you just took like the brand strategy work we did, you could go execute that by yourself and get an ROI from it versus if you were to just like pop up a pretty website, you don't really know if you're going to get any ROI from that. So brand strategy is essentially just a plan for how you're going to make your brand successful. I think people overcomplicate it. It consists, at least in my world, it consists of a couple of different things. Understanding your target market and really knowing how to speak to them in a unique way. So basically, how are you differentiating yourself and how are you keeping your messaging consistent so that your brand stays memorable in their eyes? The other thing is, how are you approaching marketing? So generally, brand strategy with us looks like, how can we take all of the insight that we got from our target market and create a marketing plan that aligns with how our brand is visually going to work and how its tone of voice is, how it's speaking. And then also you can even get into as nitty gritty as like, how are you expanding your product line? What other products might do well? Like what other stores would do well if I wanted to wholesale? All of those things can fall under the umbrella of brand strategy. So it kind of depends on what your intention is around brand strategy. Are you just using it to guide your website? Are you using it to guide product development? Like depending on how you're using it, it can do different things for your business.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of times when you run without any plan of where you're going, like you end up completely the wrong direction. And what I found with a lot of really successful entrepreneurs who just don't really understand cohesion in brand, they don't understand brand voice, brand tone, the visuals, the non-visuals. When there's gaps in that, they have usually some of the best services, but they kind of become like the secret, basically the best kept secret of like their industry. And I think that in a very oversaturated market, that becomes very common. What types of clients are coming to you? Like, what are their current issues? What are they facing? What are they hiring you for? What's happening in your industry? Because that might relate to a lot of people that are like sitting here like, oh yeah, that's why I haven't had the success I want, is because I have basically no strategy, just all execution. So I'm curious, like what types of businesses are coming to you and what are they struggling with right now?
Yeah, so I primarily work with e-commerce businesses. I'll speak to that first. Right now, I've noticed that e-commerce businesses are struggling with a lot of logistical things. So tariffs, having to change what countries they're shipping to, which is really unfortunate because that's something that's kind of out of your control and there's really not much you can do about it. I've also noticed a lot of concern about like team building and wanting to be super inclusive and making sure that you are being just ethical about the way you run your business, especially with things like tariffs bringing politics to the forefront. I've noticed like this big focus on that with e-commerce founders in general, which is really interesting because I think it used to be an industry where especially newer founders were more worried about like product development and making their product look pretty. And now I'm noticing a lot more founders are coming to me quite nervous or afraid about logistics. And so that would be one thing. I've also noticed a lot more focus on competition and like wanting to compete with the big dogs of the industry because brands like Rhode and Poppy, which both have female founders, have sold for like unicorn status or sold for over $1 billion. And so I think people have been expanded by that and see what's possible with their e-commerce business. So I've noticed founders coming into it with much bigger goals, which is awesome, but then not really knowing what it takes in terms of investment to get there and wanting to completely be self-funded and never get investors and build this on their own when in reality, the companies they're looking up to like didn't do that. And so this lack of like cohesion between expectation and reality that when founders come to me, I kind of have to be like, okay, we can do that. But like, you need to be willing to have a pitch deck and go pitch to people to invest in your company, because right now you don't have the budget for that. Those are most of the trends I see in the e-commerce space. And then to speak to service providers who might feel like the hidden gems of the industry, because I do work with service providers occasionally. One of the biggest things I've noticed is they're working with really great business coaches, but then they don't have the visual backing. And so they end up blaming the business coach, when in reality, it's just because they're executing the strategy in a really ugly way that doesn't make them look trustworthy.
She said it, not me.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, for example, Ashley tells you to go film content. And so you film content in your like strange, dark closet. You would not buy from someone who had content filmed in that way. You're buying from the coach who's in their beautiful Chicago apartment with stunning lighting, like, and a strong personality presence.
She sounds real good.
She does. So I think it's kind of more about executing the strategy at a high level. And that changed my business too, is realizing like, oh, okay, I probably shouldn't have puppy pads in the background of my video. Like, I actually need to make this aesthetic. And content and strategy in general started working a lot better for me when I started being way more intentional about how things looked. And like, yes, you can be yourself, but you can clean things up a little bit, I think.
Right. And even like pricing and positioning, I could talk about that topic. I don't even know if you saw this the other day. I was talking about like turning 33 and this big move and all this stuff. And I literally said the words, which I've never really said out loud. Like, I'm getting to this point in business where I realize some people are just not, they don't have what it takes to be a business owner. And that's not a negative thing, because there's people that don't have what it takes or don't want to have what it takes for a lot of different areas of life, being a mom, being a wife. Like, you can go down the rabbit hole of that topic. It's not a bad thing. But I think that there's that like piece that I struggle with even as a business coach of like, I can give everyone literally the blueprint. I can literally say, go do these things, but their ability to go out and understand like, okay, this doesn't feel professional, or this feels very not engaging, or any of those types of things. This is more like a talking point than a question. But I think it's really interesting because one of the things that you do very well is you understand your brand tone. You understand how to make things engaging. Like, even if it wasn't the most activating piece of content, it comes off professional, it comes off expensive. And so there's all these different elements of like your pricing, your positioning, your tone, your brand voice. Like, there's all these elements that can make or break a business that really can't be taught from a business coach about. I mean, you can in some ways if you're hiring like a brand director, but what would you say as far as like if someone was sitting at a position in their business, they feel like they're starting to see success, they want to hire a business coach, when do they actually need like a brand strategist like you? When are they thinking, oh, I'll hire a business coach to get me more sales? How can they evaluate their brand to actually say, no, I just really have a very disconnected online presence. People don't see me and see my product or my service. And that's what I should be investing in, not a coach that's going to help me quote, like make more money. What's your like thoughts on that?
I have different thoughts on this for e-commerce founders and service providers.
Okay, I'm ready to hear.
If you're an e-commerce founder, I almost never think that you should hire a business coach before you do branding. If you're going to make any investment, it should go brand strategy and branding, website design, and copy. And hiring a business coach is like after you've started scaling and you have logistical issues that you want to work out, because none of the strategy that the business coach is going to give you is going to really work unless you already have a product with general product market fit and strong brand strategy and brand design behind it, because it's such a visual business to be in. Like, people buy off of the shelf based off of your brand. They buy direct to consumer based off your brand. Your social media will grow because of your brand. And so that's my opinion on e-commerce founders hiring business coaches. I've almost never seen like anyone get ROI from doing that first. It has to go the opposite way. If you're a service provider, I think that you can do it either order, but I do think that service providers, which is funny, tend to be hesitant to hire a service provider before they hire a coach. And I was thinking about why this is, and I think it's because a coach feels like they touch more areas of your business.
So you get more because they like go wider.
It feels like you get more, which I do think there's like a really important place for having business coaching. And I definitely think I see gaps in people who like don't have a business coach in terms of the questions that they're asking.
Yeah.
But if you feel like you have a solid business coach and you know that they're giving you good strategy, before you blame the coach, I would consider looking into what areas of your business need refining and hiring those out and seeing that as just as much, if not more, of an ROI based investment than your business coach. Like, sure, hiring a website designer, they probably aren't going to guarantee you results, and they shouldn't, especially not in the same way that a coach might be able to, because they're constantly guiding you. But long term, you're going to see a much higher investment ROI on that, because it's going to help your coach work better for you. It's going to help your ads work better in the future. It's going to help sign more clients. It's going to make your sales process easier. And so don't be hesitant to hire service providers, even like beyond brand, like a CFO or a copywriter. Things like that are important.
As a business coach, I 1000% agree. I literally would not have changed anything you said. I 1000 freaking percent agree. Okay, I want to put your like business brand brain to the test, if that's okay. I think being a founder facing brand these days is so big. And I think more founders and more business owners are aware of more brands because they are connected to the brand founders. And a great example of this is Hailey Bieber and Rhode, or like Shay Mitchell and Bays. Like, you probably wouldn't care about those brands if you didn't have this connection to the founder, which I think is really critical. So my awareness of different brands has become bigger. My knowledge of bigger brands has become like more profound. And I have more people talk to me about like big brands that they love just because they're so invested, like the founder or the mission or whatever it is. So I'm curious for you, could you tell me a brand that is out there right now? It can be any brand that you're like, they are crushing from like a marketing, branding standpoint that you just want to like touch on. It can be any brand. First one that comes to mind, who's your favorite? Who's doing well?
Yeah, I have two. One is Edam. I think Edam is like such a hidden gem in the industry because they are absolutely crushing the game.
I don't even know what that is. What's Edam?
Edam is a beauty company for like women of color. I think they're absolutely crushing the game. They're always on the pulse with branding. They have like this really great approach where it feels timeless, but they're also able to integrate trend in like a really unique way. So that would be one brand. Another brand that I think is doing really well is Topicals. Topicals is like another really on the pulse kind of cool brand for skincare. And they've been doing really, really well. Another brand I find very interesting is Secret. It's Beyonce's brand. And I think they've done an interesting job because they're doing really well, but not a lot of people know Beyonce's behind that brand. And so I think they've done a good job of building up brand equity in the way that they visually like have presented their products, where Beyonce like does not have to be involved. It feels like a surprise when you find out, oh, this is Beyonce's brand. I didn't know that. That's so cool. And so you want to keep buying it versus using her to like launch the product and really gain a lot of visibility. I thought that was an interesting approach.
That is really interesting. I'm familiar with 2 out of the 3, so I'll have to check out the other one. Obviously, I'm not a woman of color, so that makes sense why I don't know that brand. But I will say, Gloria on TikTok, I'm such a big fan of hers, advocating for more diversity in makeup brands and skincare brands that are not appealing to women of all colors and backgrounds. So I'm very on trend of that topic because I've been very fascinated, because I obviously, as a white woman with very pale skin, minus my spray tan, I've always had products that work for my skin tone. And I didn't know that that was like a big issue. So even my awareness of issues that are causing these brands to be disruptors in the industry, I could go on that topic for so long. Okay, on the opposite end though, so those are brands that you love. Dream brand to work with, manifest it right now. Who's the dream brand that you're like, I could totally change their strategy. I could go out, I would do X, Y, and Z for them. Give us the pitch. Who would it be? And what do you feel like they're missing the mark on that you would want to help with?
Oh, this is such a good question. Okay, there's a lot of founders who I'm working with right now who don't, maybe they'll listen to this. So I'm like,
you're going to send them this afterwards. You're like,
but they don't like want to invest in production and product photography. And I think that's a major missed point in the market. I would actually rather you invest in like creative direction and product photography and video before you do brand, because you can slap like a text-based logo on a really good photo of your product and see a lot more visibility than an awesome logo on a horrible photo. And so in general, I would love to see more starter brands invest more into brand photography, especially if they're not like a vintage brand or like a brand that thrifts products and has constant drops where it would be unrealistic for them to keep up with that photography. If they have a product line that stays pretty static, like really invest in that photography from the get-go, and you will see so much more ROI on your brand in general because of those high quality visuals.
Is there like a big brand out there that you're like, oh, this is the best brand ever if only they did this?
Yeah, Odd Muse. Odd Muse is a good example of this. They have really good imagery. Their logo is the worst thing like I've ever seen, and their website is not the best either. And it's interesting because the founder is so like aesthetic. They have such great photos, and I'm so curious to know why they won't change their branding. They have such opportunity.
Oh, there you go. Amy from Odd Muse. You heard your fears. I freaking love it. Sacia, the last thing I want to ask you, something we always ask our guests, what's something you're indulging on right now? You're loving, it could be a food, a hobby, time in your day that you dedicate to something, a podcast. Obviously, we know you love ours. But like, what's something that you're just like indulging, loving, binging on? Give us something that our audience can go and check out later.
I have been loving painting recently. I love like abstract art. And so I've really been diving into learning more about the craft of painting because I used to get really frustrated with myself and just get mad and feel like I was a horrible
I'm
artist.
shocked you have time to paint in the middle of everything. Like that shocks me, but I'll stop.
I barely do, but I need to get off my screen. And so I've been using this platform called Arie, like I think it's ARIE, but it's basically a platform where they teach different types of abstract art and they take artists and directly like create classes with them, and it's not crazy expensive. So if you are into creative things, I would definitely check that out.
Oh my gosh, I have like 2 people I immediately was like, I have to send that to. Arie, you heard it if you're first. If you want to get into painting, maybe get into your creative zone. I agree though, the screen thing, like your generation too is just like screen addicts, but I feel like you're pretty good about that. Like I feel like you're not too bad, especially for having a business on your phone. You do okay.
I think my screen time's been at like 3 hours, which is not crazy. I don't think.
No, better than mine. So
my little sister said hers was like 6 to 8. So I feel like I'm doing pretty good.
Mine was 8, which was really bad. Now mine's down to like 3 or 4, but like, let me tell you, the screen. And I actually need to check that out because I feel like it would be very good for me to have some creative outlets outside of business, outside of everything else. So I think that's good that you are doing something that is not related to the business or the growth of the business you just enjoy doing. So kudos to you, girl. I'm so happy you've come on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Of course, of course.